Whether you want to see him as a sidekick or his own hero, if you've never read a Robin or a Nightwing book before, then this is a video for you.
Woof woof!
Hey guys, it's me Marcus, aka the Mad Dog, and we're back with another video. As is kind of tradition when we Where to Start series, the first book that I ever read for this character was a little trade paperback that was called Nightwing, The Hunt for Oracle. And little did I know at that time that I was jumping headfirst into the seminal Nightwing run that was done by Dixon. The original trade paperbacks of this were never numbered that well, and I don't even think they were complete, but for 70 or so issues, Dixon solidified that Nightwing is who Dick Grayson should have always been. And he's also the hero that Bloodhaven deserves. And looking back on the history of it now, it felt like this was the first time that he was ever really allowed to be his own hero and really step outside of the shadow of Batman. But the action is dynamic and keeps it interesting. It places Grayson in a new location, and it did go on for many issues after Dixon left, but I definitely feel like he was the peak of this series. So whether you start with a 4-issue mini or a random arc that took place throughout the series, this is fun, easy to enjoy, goes on for a while, and even had a recap of his origin story partway through, but we're gonna touch on that later. Next up, if you wanted a similar pick but for Tim Drake, I'm gonna go with Robin by Dixon. Admittedly, doing a Where to Start on any member of the Batfamily and recommending Dixon is quite an easy and cliched pick, but with good reason. It's quite similar to what I just said about the Nightwing run, but for 100 issues, Dixon solidified that Tim Drake is his own character, and not just somebody who's Batman's sidekick. But this run will give you years with this character where he is going off on his own adventures. He is finding his feet as a vigilante because he was still quite a young character in the grand scheme of things at this point. Admittedly, it spiraled out of Nightfall, so you might need to know a bit about that, but if you can get over that initial hurdle at the very beginning, then you're pretty much greeted with a fresh start. And even though the 90s gets a bad rep when it comes to comics, this series finds itself in that perfect midpoint where each story arc takes place over a couple of issues, so it's not like you read one issue and you feel like you're done, but if you don't read all 70, it won't feel like you're being penalised. And if you did decide to follow the full run, even when Dixon left the title, you've got writers like Bill Willingham and Adam Beechan taking over, so you can have over a decade with this character. In terms of publishing, I don't know how slow you read. Yeah, it is a bit of a task if you do want to read the full thing because the trade paperbacks aren't that easy to complete, and the quality does dip a bit here and there, but if you wanted to see Tim's full journey, this is pretty much the best place that you can go to. For my next recommendation, I'm going with Under the Red Hood. Now, there's not a lot of Jason Todd titles that I can recommend, and you don't really hear too many people saying that Jason Todd is a favourite Robin. I bet there's going to be somebody who's offended by that. But for Red Hood, I still feel like his best story was his introduction. Under the Red Hood is one of those titles that was originally trying to be a bit of a mystery, but it's one that's now being solved and well known. But it's still a great story, giving you a recap on who this character is, showing you just how much he's changed, and also establishing who Jason wants to be now. There's a ton of emotion, great development for Batman, and deals more with the mafia, street level type crime, along with the unfinished business with the Joker. I also really like the art. There's some great, big, vibrant fights that are going on throughout this. It was a tough task to bring Jason Todd back into the DC universe, especially after his death was decided on a vote, but somehow this story managed to find a way to do it in a way that felt natural, but also made you excited for what could come for this character next. From here, you could pretty much jump into any Red Hood series, or you could even go straight into 3 Jokers. But for a refresher course on the trauma of Jason Todd, a springboard for where he could go, and also just the most exciting story that this character's probably ever had, I can't recommend better than this. And also, it comes at a great time because they have recently announced that there's going to be a deluxe edition later on this year, which you can already order with the discount codes that we've got with the channel sponsor, Organic Price Books. They've got great packaging, fast shipping, and amazing customer services, and if you use code WOOFWOOF, you'll get $2 off your order. And if you're ordering 3 or more books and you want them to be delivered together, make sure you use code WOOFWOOF, ship it together for 5% off your entire order. Don't worry, you can just copy and paste them from the description down below, and you can use these codes as many times as you like. After that, I'm going with the new Teen Titans. Now, when it comes to DC characters, I try to avoid recommending stories that came out before Crisis on Infinite Earths. Although they've got some merit, I often find they're just difficult to get into. They don't have a lot of relevance to what's going on today, and they're just so wordy. But the biggest exception to that rule is New Teen Titans. It was kicked off by Marv Wolfman and George Perez, so you've got top tier talent that started this, and they put Dick Grayson at the forefront of this, and I feel like I've said this sentence a few times, but this was kind of the first opportunity he got to stand outside of the shadow of the Dark Knight. And I spoke a little bit about the history of this. I mean, George Perez, top 5 notable works, but they brought together a team of great younger characters such as Beast Boy, Raven, Starfire, Cyborg, and countless others, to give us one of those titles where each issue feels like it's its own complete story, but at the same time it feels like it's contributing to something bigger. Over the course of this series, you do get to see how Dick Grayson steps into this leadership role, and the struggles that he has, and also how that reflects on his own relationship with Batman. And sure, the longer the series goes on, you do get some more overarching plots, but I also think that they are some of the clear highlights of this entire run. There were a few relaunches throughout the run, but I'd recommend just jumping in at the beginning and enjoying the ride. And if you wanted to see how Robin became Nightwing, then this is the run for you, because you can see that entire transition. I'd also recommend Jeph Johns' run on Teen Titans. Yeah, it wasn't Dick Grayson, but you've still got Robin in the picture. And this is newer than the new Teen Titans, but it's also not the newest Teen Titans. So yeah, it is Tim Drake, and it's mostly a different roster, but still hits the criteria to be great for new Robin readers. And that could also be a platform so that you could read that if it was that you know about some of the other characters, and then you could jump into something like Chuck Dixon's run. Okay, I might need to justify this next one a bit, but I'm gonna go with Lonely Place of Dying. Is there a bit of continuity that you'd need to know to be able to enjoy this? Yeah. But is this the perfect introduction if you want to read Tim Drake? Obviously, because it's the first time that he became Robin, but it's great because it's Tim Drake showcasing all of his great attributes and why Batman needs another Robin after he pretty much swore off it after Jason Todd died. Spoilers. He's smart, charismatic, and what he lacks in combat experience, he makes up for in just not being Jason Todd. There's also just a really wholesome feeling with this, especially if you've already read A Death in the Family, and it's pretty short if you did just want something to do with Tim Drake without needing one of these longer runs. I'm also going to recommend the Nightwing New 52 run. Yeah, this should come as a surprise to nobody who's watched this channel before, because the New 52 is my jam. But the Dick Grayson New 52 era is a weird time because he changed his costume, or mostly just the colour, and I didn't dislike it, but I didn't prefer it over the original. But the story here is an interesting one to follow because it did focus more on his origin as a circus performer. It was also written by Kyle Higgins, who then went on to do the Boom Studios MMPR series and gave us Lord Draken. So yeah, I might just be biased here, but there's definitely quality that was working on this title. But even then, it still remained decent once he left and Tim Seeley took over. It also gave us some more great moments between Nightwing and Batman, and it also just feels like there's a complete story here after the 30 issues are done. This also set up a way more interesting and dynamic storyline that followed. Speaking of which, Grayson. Yep, if you watch my underrated New 52 runs, you shouldn't be surprised that this is included here. You might be one of those people that doesn't want to read an overly superhero story, although admittedly you might have chose the worst medium for that. But when it comes to Dick Grayson, there's a perfect story if you're in that scenario. Having been presumed dead, the former Nightwing becomes a secret agent, and he's able to use his tactical cunning that he learned from the years with Batman and his clever disguises to infiltrate places that a superhero just wouldn't. I can't lie, there's not much overlap here if you wanted to use this to be able to get into more series that involve Dick Grayson, but you know what, it's fun and it mostly stays true to the Dick Grayson character whilst just giving you this exciting spy thriller. The omnibus also recently got reprinted, which again you can pick up from organic price books. I mentioned the discount codes before and hopefully you were watching. Don't make me play that advert again. Batman Dark Victory. Yeah, I know it's kind of ironic that I'm recommending a sequel as a great place for beginners, but Dark Victory works great as an origin story for Dick Grayson without needing to tie into any of the main continuity. And beyond just that, the whole Loeb Sale collection of Batman stories works great regardless of how much you know about the Batman or Robin mythology. So on top of a story that introduces you into Grayson, you also just get one of the best Batman stories in a self-contained 14-issue series. And if I'm being honest, this might be a controversial take, but when I reviewed this early on when I started doing this channel, I remember enjoying Dark Victory more than I did Long Halloween. And I think it's because I really liked that connection that Bruce and Grayson had and how they developed it and how it felt like a natural progression. So this has got great abstract art, it's a complete story, and it's just an all-around good time regardless of if you wanted to read more Robin or Nightwing after this. Next up, I'm going Batman and Robin by Tomasi and Gleason. Another one that I reviewed on this channel, so if you've got the time, please go and watch that because I need the views. But this omnibus is great because it took place across multiple continuities. It started as a continuation of Grant Morrison's run on Batman and Robin, then continued when the universe shifted into the New 52. And this was just a really fun, wacky adventure story that featured Bruce and Damian. Although, fair warning, it does get a bit depressing in the middle. And the best part about this run is exploring the dynamic between the two, because they are actually father and son, which does make it different from any of the other connections that you had with the previous Robins. You've also got Bruce trying to morph into this more nurturing role, which is difficult for him because, you know, he's a bit emotionally unavailable, but he knows he needs to do it because of all those tendencies that are still in Damian's head because of his experience with the League of Shadows. And in a way, it's just nice having these few moments where you really get to see Bruce be happy again. And sure, the series is great from the start when Dick Grayson was the Dark Knight, but that also requires you to have read everything that Morrison's done for the character, which I'm reluctant to say is new reader friendly, so instead I'm going to recommend the middle part. But if you did want a Batman and Robin title that features Damian and sees him interacting with a wide range of the DC universe, then this will probably be the best starting point for you. Super Sons, and yeah, we're looking at Damian again, but this time he's teaming up with the son of Superman, John. You get to see this duo work together as they learn about their abilities and responsibilities, whilst at the same time teaming up with people like Lex Luthor so that they can save the Justice League, go through trials to see if they can join the Teen Titans, and also travel through space and time. Especially if you try and get a younger reader into comics and you think that Robin might be that character that's going to be the gateway for them, you know, just in case they're at the age where Bruce might actually try and recruit them in real life, then this would be a great recommendation because you get to see Damian's brutal, rough and unforgiving demeanour complemented nicely with John's hope and optimism. And also the omnibus is getting reprinted this year, so this is going to be something that's very easy to get your hands on. This one might be a controversial pick, but I'm going to go with Batman Black Mirror. Yeah, I know this is a Nightwing / Robin list, but it's Dick Grayson that's under the cowl, so I'm going to count it. And also just because this is one of the best stories that you can read for Dick Grayson. And you might think that this wouldn't help you tremendously in branching into a Nightwing or Robin story, but what Scott Snyder did well was highlight the subtle differences between Bruce and Dick just for the way that they operate as Batman. This is also a darker, more serious, crime thriller, mystery investigation type story if that's the type that you were looking for. And this is also just a great Jim Gordon story because, spoiler alert, I'm probably not going to do a where to start on his character. It'd be nice to, but I don't think that'd get very many views. Also, there's just fantastic artwork that's done by Jock, which is why I had to pick this up in the Absolute Edition. And this is just a phenomenal book, whether you know a little bit about Batman, Dick Grayson, or you know absolutely nothing about them. I'm just going to stick with the ones that I think might prove to be controversial because next up I'm going with Detective Comics by James Tynion. But if you wanted a more recent Tim Drake storyline that also involves Stephanie Brown, who was also a Robin at one point, so it's kind of like two for the price of one, then this is a great longer run that you can really get stuck into. I did a review of this early last year, and when I started it I wasn't really sure if this was going to be a book that I'd enjoy, but around the halfway mark this just goes absolutely batshit crazy and I loved it. So if you did start reading this one, especially in those first couple of issues, it might not be obvious why I've recommended it on this list, but stick with it and you will pretty much get the equivalent of a Terminator movie that features Tim Drake. Yeah, it might not be a pure Robin storyline, but Tim gets a lot of the spotlight in this, and I really think that this highlighted why he was the best sidekick that Batman ever had. Yeah, I said it. Another pick where you're going to get two for the price of one, but I'm going to go Robin Year One and Nightwing Year One. But when it comes to DC Comics, the phrase Year One is pretty much the equivalent of the bat signal for new readers. And it's sitting over my shoulder, so I kind of had to put this in the list. Both of these were written by Chuck Dixon, so you know you're in great hands with a writer that's done a lot for these characters in the past. But it's also just a great standalone story if you didn't want the full origin of him, but you wanted to see his early days as a crime fighter. And Robin Year One actually takes place after Dark Victory, but it's still a great standalone jumping on point. So yeah, it is great if you already knew the very basics, like him being a circus performer and him being adopted by Bruce Wayne, or the fact that he did splinter away from him and you want to know pretty much what happened after that. Read together, you do get to see the early days and the hope and the optimism that they had for the dynamic duo, which then led to their disbanding and him having to go off on his own and try to find his feet and understand what it meant to be his own hero. Regardless of these being set early on in his career, I still think that they're just great stories to read. So whether you wanted a refresher or you wanted to feel like you were starting at the beginning, you can't really go wrong if it's got Year One in the title. We've spoke about Damian a few times now, but if you wanted a shorter story that can introduce you into who he is without all the continuity bogging it down, then I'd recommend Damian, Son of Batman. But it isn't just relying on the duo of Batman and Robin all the time, it is him going out on his own, doing investigations, trying to get into the detective mode, and almost following in the footsteps of his father. At the same time, despite this only being 4 issues, it's going to give you a great insight into what the League of Shadows means to him, and it's written and illustrated by Andy Kubert. So you know you're in great hands and you can pretty much read through this in one sitting, but for now, if you did want something shorter to read, Son of Batman would definitely be my recommendation. And how could I do a where to start on Nightwing / Robin without recommending the phenomenal run that's currently ongoing by Todd Taylor? Yeah, it's fortunate that the current run for Dick Grayson is great if you've never read anything for this character before. Sure, it's not going to hold your hand and go through the history of he and Batman, but what it will do is just throw you into the middle of it and give you a great story where you can learn about Nightwing, his relationships, and just the way he perceives his role as a vigilante. I also feel like this is one of the more humorous Nightwing stories. It's a bit more light-hearted, even though it does have its darker moments. moments. But to me, Dick Grayson's always been the type of character that's more likely to crack a joke. He is pretty much the opposite of the personality of Batman. And I feel like this run remembers that, and it's the reason why there's so much energy and excitement in every single issue. And yeah, it is still ongoing. I've had to collect this in the standard size hardcovers, so it could very well be the case that this completely drives off a cliff and it really does not end well, and I'll end up regretting putting this on the list. And this is one of the best titles that's coming out lately, regardless of the fact that it's about Nightwing, so there was no way that I was going to leave it off this list. And my final recommendation is pretty much any Nightwing, Robin, Red Hood or Red Robin story that's going to get you into this character. I have not read everything, and you might end up reading the New 52 Red Hood and the Outlaws run, or Josh Williamson's run on Robin, and that might be a title that you really gravitate towards and enjoy. So just because it's not on this list, it doesn't mean that it's not the perfect jumping on point for you. So just have a look what's out there, see what takes your interest, and more than anything, just enjoy the comics that you end up reading. So that's going to be the video. In the comment section below, let me know what character you want to see me do a where to start on next. But until next time, just make sure that you stay safe and stay mad, all you dogs. Woof woof. See you at the next video.